Hello and welcome to Cyberside Chats. My name is Sherri Davidoff,
I'm Matt Durrin.
and today we're going to talk about the breach of Canvas, which is made by Instructure. This is perhaps the largest education sector breach in history, from what I can tell. 8,809 educational institutions were breached, over 275 million records were stolen. But in all that, the most important number, I think, Matt, is one. One vendor was hacked, and all of these academic institutions were affected, millions and millions of people. And that really gets to the most important thing we're going to talk about today, which is cloud concentration risk.
Yeah. No, it becomes a big problem. Like when we talk about incidents like this, like when we talk about Microsoft Exchange or Move It or something like this, we have to consider what the blast radius of this kind of attack might have. And if we have, say, like 41% of educational institutions that are all using the same platform, which is what Canvas was for those institutions, if Canvas gets popped, all of them end up being dominoes that fall in the trail.
I kind of wonder if there's anybody doing a risk assessment for our whole society and thinking about, if I did not think about the fact that 41% of
Mhm.
all schools in our country, or is it, I assume it's in our nation?
All I saw was educational institutions. I'd assume that's a yes, but
41% of all probably US educational institutions were using this one platform. I mean,
yeah.
that's huge. And that's not something that would have occurred to me before.
Well, and I mean, this is not the first time we've seen like a Goliath educational LMS platform be used in this way. I mean, we saw it with Blackboard back in like 2019.
Right?
Yeah, but yeah,
Well, and there was another major hack of PowerSchool just in December 2024.
right.
That was the largest breach of children's information, but this actually dwarfed it. So should we dig into what actually happened?
Sure, yeah. Let's go into the details.
Okay, on April 29th, 2026, Instructure detected unauthorized activity, they
Mhm.
said. And so that was their first indication that the Shiny Hunters group had breached them.
Well, someone had breached them.
Someone
Yeah.
had breached them. Do you want to talk a little bit about how they found out who had breached them?
Yeah, it wound up on the dark web. The Shiny Hunters told them that they breached them, which is unfortunately a way that a lot of people find out they've been
Yeah.
hacked. Their name showed up on a darknet website. They showcased that they had like 3.5 terabytes worth of data that they had downloaded, terabytes worth of data that
Terabytes,
they had
yes,
downloaded.
which is terrifying.
Yeah, which is just awful.
Terrible.
They weren't able to determine that ahead of time. And yeah, they even put out pieces of sample data, and they gave them
Uh,
until the 12th of May to either pay a ransom or have all of that data leaked out to the public internet. But
uh,
that doesn't make sense when we look at the actual timeline, because on May 2nd, they said the incident was completely contained.
yes,
So yeah,
Instructure came out and said the incident is contained, everybody is fine. And then fast forward a few days, and boom, the attackers start defacing the websites of educational institutions, the
yeah,
login pages.
yeah.
So clearly they were back in the system. And that also goes to some questions about how much do we rely on our vendors when it comes to incident response? Because clearly Instructure thought this was contained, thought they had kicked the bad guys out, and then
Mhm.
boom, they were back in.
Well, yeah, they were confident enough about it to put out a statement that said it's contained.
Yes.
Yeah.
And interestingly, they did put out some details on the second wave mechanism. We don't know a whole lot about how they got in the first time,
Mhm.
other than the threat actor said that they actually used internal commands in order to exfiltrate the data. And
Yeah.
in fact, it was the normal commands that a customer uses. They were able to use those to export the data.
Yeah, it was the same RESTful API commands that you would use as a client to
Right.
pull your data back from the system. But yeah, they went ahead and just basically emptied out the entire trough.
Yeah, and that made me really think about, well, all the Salesforce breaches we've been seeing.
Yeah.
Because when we talked about the Salesforce drift breach in the fall, and also the Salesforce breaches that Google had investigated.
Mhm. Which were also Shiny Hunters.
Yes, and also Instructure. Instructure also, by the way, got hacked by Shiny Hunters, 8 months ago,
Yeah,
back
right
in
about.
September of 2025, because they had an employee who got tricked
Mhm.
into allowing access to their Salesforce instance. And one of the big takeaways we talked about on the time on this podcast was limiting the amount of data that can be exfiltrated all at once.
Yeah.
This also reminds me of Stryker, where, have a second person, require a second person to authorize any really damaging commands. And I think that applies not just to remotely wiping devices, but also to exfiltrating huge volumes of data.
Yeah, to dump an entire database worth
Yeah.
of data. Yeah, I mean, you would hope there would be some kind of control in place that would, at the very least, let you
Yes.
know that was happening.
Yeah, at least
Yeah.
give someone an alert. By by the way, all of your student records are being exfiltrated.
Yeah,
Now, unfortunately, you really do need to rely on the vendor in a lot of those cases in order to put those controls in place. So
sure.
the question is, are cloud vendors actually putting those controls in place, giving you the tools you need to get an alert or to require a second person to authorize bulk export of
Right.
sensitive information?
Well, I know like with Amazon security controls, like when we're talking about S3 and things like that, I mean, they give you the ability to install threshold alarms that will notify you of exactly that. Like if your data usage spikes all of a sudden, or your CPU
Right.
usage spikes, or something is just out of your normal band of
Yeah.
usage, it will let you know.
Well, they learned the hard
Yeah,
way.
they did. That's true.
After millions and millions of people's information was stolen from S3
Yeah.
buckets, or cryptojacking occurred, and people had like tens of thousands of dollars in bills that they didn't expect. So, yes, some of the more mature cloud vendors have put that in, but not all of them. And my guess is that Canvas probably does not include a mature system for alerting or putting additional controls on data exfiltration.
Right, and I mean, to me, it also illustrates, a couple other things. When we look at it, and again, we're speculating a little bit right now because we
We are.
don't know the exact way that the attackers got in. But the fact that they were using these API queries means that they likely had some kind of identity on the system, and this comes
Sure.
down to
Or created it.
yeah, or created it. But it comes down to that identity management element. Like if it was an account that had been taken over, then there should be some kind of control in place to limit what kind of access that account has, unless it's the golden developer for your environment or something like that. But even
Need
if
to limit the
yeah,
golden
but
developer.
even if not, if they're creating new accounts that have those permissions, I mean, there should be some kind of mechanism to like what Microsoft has. I mean, it will alert you if there's a new
Yeah.
account that's created that has those kind of permissions. So,
Yeah.
and those things were not in place
And if
here.
it's not new, if it's an account that's in place, you're
Yeah.
right. Like you really need to keep an eye on it.
The other thing is the disclosure part. Like that one got me, but we can talk about that in a
Yeah,
second
well, I
here.
did want to mention the second time the attackers got in,
Hmm.
Instructure did put out a statement, and they said that the attacker, the second time, exploited an issue related to their free for teacher accounts, and Instructure has shut those accounts down. So I think that gets back to identity. Did those were those accounts over provisioned? Did they have access to more than they
Sure.
should? How did the attackers use those to deface all those organizations' pages?
Yeah.
So,
Kind of interesting.
but you were going to touch on something.
Oh yeah, I was talking about the disclosure thing, and this is what kind of gets me here, and it's the fact that uh, the victim in this case was so confident to come out and say that like we've stopped the bleeding, or we've like
Instructure?
yeah, Instructure, we've
Yes.
stopped the bleeding, we have stopped the attack, we are cleared out at this point, and then to see it come back a couple days later, and you know that the shiny hunters are notorious for being kind of tricky when it comes to hacking people, and they will do things to apply pressure. In this case, they just went ahead and put it out there for everyone to see, including the students that were trying to log into the platforms.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and it's important to understand that Shiny Hunters is not one
Yeah,
specific
that's true.
organization. They're really not organized at all. They're more of like a brand or a label.
Mhm.
And new actors come in and use that brand, and other actors go away. So it's not like one single organized group.
Yeah,
And we have like general trends and general like ways that they operate, but that's not like, a requirement of their
sure.
organization. Now, all of this was happening at the worst possible time for students and teachers because here we are coming right into finals, right into graduation, and their LMS is shut down.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty terrible timing, unfortunately.
Well, and you have to think the timing's probably intentional.
I wonder if
Yeah.
it's on purpose. I remember a few years ago when the FBI alerted the agriculture sector about the timing of ransomware attacks, how they were timed with harvest seasons.
Yeah.
And I would not be surprised if this was very explicitly timed.
No, not at all.
All right. Well, shall we wrap it up and talk about our key takeaways?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. Well, first key takeaway is make sure that you inventory all of the SaaS platforms you rely on and understand what the blast radius is if they get hacked. So if all of the information were going to be exfiltrated, who would be impacted? If you don't know what you have, you can't protect it. So that's step one.
Next, and this doesn't necessarily apply directly to the Instructure hack, but I mean, when we're talking about gaining access to these systems, it's really important that if you do get credentials stolen, you have phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication in place, especially on administrative and remote access accounts.
Well, yeah, and we don't know
Yeah.
exactly how this happened, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was an account takeover
Oh no,
involved
I
here.
wouldn't be
So
surprised
I
at
think
all. I
it's
mean,
totally fair to throw that one out.
shiny hunters are notorious for voice phishing and regular social engineering attacks
Yes.
that use adversary in the middle style tactics. Like it's their big thing. So it would not surprise me at all to hear that that's what happened.
Yeah. All right, number three, make sure you monitor and alert on bulk data exfiltration. Sometimes we have that set up on our networks or maybe like in Microsoft 365, but take a look at the cloud platforms you rely on: Salesforce, Canvas, any other system. And if you have sensitive data in there, especially a large volume, make sure that you're alerting and ideally that you have an extra control in place so that someone can't just exfiltrate all your data if they get access to the wrong account.
Yeah, that's huge. The next thing we want to talk about is data retention, and this comes up a lot when we talk about well, just data theft in general. I mean, one of the reasons why we probably saw such a large volume of data taken is because they probably hold a lot of just historical data that they don't really need, and
Yes.
that is not necessarily on Instructure to police that. That's usually the users that are responsible for removing that data, and oftentimes they don't. But if you're keeping data for a lot longer than you need it, you are just basically elevating your risk exponentially at that point.
I wonder how many of those 275 million records needed to be in the
Right?
system.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see.
Many organizations hold data for years longer than they need to, and you pay for that as well.
Yeah,
So ideally, purge it. It costs less and it means that you reduce your
yeah,
risk as well.
totally.
All right. Finally, treat any vendor's announcement that an incident is contained as a hypothesis until you have confirmed it for yourself. I think we've seen it again and again. I mean, Matt, you were on ransomware case after case after case. How many times have you seen like a second wave of ransomware
Uh,
or a re extortion or just an infection that didn't get fully cleaned out?
More times than I'd like to admit. I mean, it's unfortunately common enough that it becomes a top of mind issue right when you begin a case at this point.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
There's always a risk that the attackers have some kind of foothold. So keep that in mind.
yeah.
All right, we'll keep you guys posted. Thanks so much for tuning in this week. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week on Cyberside Chats.